Hi out there in YouTube land. So, thought I'd post another quick update for you. Today is Friday the 13th, which is not a scary day for me. It's actually always been one of the luckiest days of the calendar for me. So, I've always been kind of disappointed that it doesn't come around more often, to tell you the truth. In this case, well, this year, Friday is, in our house, my day off, which is nice because it means, I can do what I want. I can sit around reading or watching TV or doing this, listening to music, whatever I want, and I enjoy that. I usually don't make the most of my day off. There are weeks, there are times I do, but I usually don't. There's too much else I have to do. There's too much else going on. Wow, these are really tinted. Everything looks so bright when I take them off. But yeah, so before I forget, I want to make a book recommendation. Joseph Campbell, The Power of Myth. You've probably heard of him from PBS if you watch PBS. A lot of people say they do, but they don't actually. I actually do because I grew up on PBS imported British comedy, as I've told you before. I don't watch as many of the in-depth intellectual series as I think more people really should. And that's not just because I've become a naturally academic person. I think a lot of them are a lot more insightful than people really give them credit for. And not enough people pay attention to lessons other people have learned to make their own lives easier or better or more insightful. So, it's a thought. I've been reading it, and I usually read when Sam's not home, just because that's usually when I have time, because I'm still job hunting. And I tend to read in kind of like a audiobook style. Like, I'm actually reading a book, like I'm holding a book in my hand, but I read it out loud to myself because I've always been the kind of person who did better learning from audio. Like, I read really fast. I'm actually a speed reader at an incredibly high level. In 5th grade, they told me I read at a college level. So understanding the material isn't the problem. It's just I tend to retain more of it if I hear it in a certain metered way. So I tend to read out loud to myself, which is good for several reasons. One, I retain more, and two, it forces me to practice speech, public speaking and stuff. Nowadays, people tell me, wow, you have this really fluid method of speech, and it's so engaging, and, it's this, that, and the other thing, and I appreciate that. I've worked hard to be able to sound that way, but that's how I did it, reading out loud to myself, because if I can't read it out loud in a way that I want to hear, I have less than no confidence I'm going to be able to read it in a way anyone else is going to want to hear. So I read out loud to myself. And I was also a student reader. There are some programs in some schools where you go from the higher grades to the younger grades as like one of your activities during the day, and you read to the younger kids. So like the kids I babysitted when I was younger, to this day, the freak occurrences I run into their parents, because this was back in Maine and I'm in New York now, but to this day, those parents, when they run into me, no, she's doing great in school. She's always been this really avid reader because you always made it so fun for her when she was little. So, I don't know. I hope I can do that for our nephew as well. Because I really want him to have the same kind of love of literature and words and stuff. But he's becoming a thick little dude, our nephew. I can really see him, getting into sports and stuff, not just for health, but, he seems like a pretty solidly built little dude. But yeah, so what was I saying? I was saying so many things at once. The book. I was reading what music am I playing? This is not the Beatles song I want to listen to. Hang on. I was reading this book out loud to myself, The Power of Myth, and it really kind of rung a note with me because, there's what I want. It really kind of hits on a lot of the mythical, spiritual things that I've been saying for the bulk of my life. I'll take these back off because I just need to be able to see. A lot of the things I've said before in my life, and a lot of the things that I've always felt. Now, to be fair, I've studied mythology the better part of my conscious existence. I remember being in 3rd and 4th grade, and I was not remotely interested in earth science. I just wanted to read about Greco-Roman pantheons. I don't know, it just made a lot more sense to me as a kid that there would be a multitude of deities in charge of different things, because the idea, I'm not knocking it, okay? I am not remotely knocking the idea of monotheism. If all you believe in is one ultimate God, okay, fine. That makes sense to you. It doesn't make sense to me. It seems almost more humanizing to think that there are many deities, because it's such a responsibility to take care of all of humanity's problems with this one issue that you really need to, divvy it up. I mean, you have to delineate who's responsible for what and delegate. So pantheons make more sense to me. But it also speaks a lot about exactly what it says it does in the title, the power of myth, and how a lot of that knowledge has been lost, and how it shouldn't have been, how we should try and get it back. And I read the chapters out of order, which is kind of a strange thing to do, but, there's chapters for a reason, and when it comes to myth, it's all going to play into each other anyway, so I don't think it really matters what order you read it in. It's not like reading Gilgamesh, where it's sequential and episodic. You have to read it in order. But I was reading a chapter about marriage and the myth of marriage and the spirituality of marriage and how it's supposed to be viewed and seen and how it was historically taken and how it's taken in, well, the book's a little out of date from today. I mean, it's not a recent publication, but modern society. And it's still pertinent. I mean, the relevant information that he's giving is still pertinent, because in our culture, in our society today, love and marriage are not seen the same as they, classically, quote unquote, have so-called been seen. I mean, as I've mentioned before, this is my personal philosophy. Love has nothing to do with the box and gift wrapping it comes in. It doesn't. The point is what's inside the box, the love itself, not how you present it. Ooh, it's pretty and pink, it's a girl. Ooh, it's this glorious blue and it's a boy. Who the hell cares? To someone who's colorblind, what difference does that make? But, so that's a difference in our current line of thinking as opposed to classical thinking, which is good. I mean, I'm glad our society is evolving, slow and painful as the process might be, to accept and realize and acknowledge the reality that you can't base love on gender. You really can't. I mean, love and gender have about as little to do with each other as, I mean, I can't even, there's so many things I could compare it to. The point is that they're remarkably unrelated, I'm going on speaking about how great I am at public speaking now, and I lose my English half the time when I try to talk for this. That's why these last 15 minutes. Back on the logic train. But yeah. So, modern society versus classic society. Our current society understands that love is love and gender is meaningless. Well, alright, I take that back. Not meaningless, but not as significant. It's not ranked as high a priority as it used to be, because it used to be that was the only priority. If you were male, you married a female, you had children. That was the end of it. Marriage used to be a social contract, and in parts of the world it still is. In parts of the Middle East, in parts of the southern Asian continent. I know geography, but I'm never really sure if India counts as part of Asia or not. Because I think India to me is so big. I mean, even just on a map, it is so large. It is a nation unto itself, but it almost feels like a world unto itself to me, and I've never been there. But in places like parts of the Middle East and India, and probably other cultures I'm not aware of, arranged marriage is still a thing. It's still a common practice. Love has nothing to do with it. It's a social, political contract. And in many cases, an economical one, too, because, there's a reason there are dowries involved. So I think in countries that are more unrestricted in how marriages come to pass, because the arranged marriage plays a function in the societies in which it is prevalent. In American society specifically, it's irrelevant. I'm sure there are people in the higher echelons of earning brackets who do marry for merger purposes or political purposes, and those are the ones that after a few years and they get divorced, people are like, oh yeah, well, their stocks are in the tank too. That shouldn't be the case. It shouldn't be that public. It shouldn't be that wrapped up in itself and self-perpetuating, self-involved. That's not what marriage is supposed to be. Marriage is supposed to be the reunification of self. The best marriages, the ones I've seen and the ones I've heard about, the ones that people usually identify with in story, are the ones where someone finds themselves, their other half incarnate in another living human being. So, I don't know. Like I said, gender has nothing to do with that. Sex of the person has nothing to do with that. The point is that you're in a relationship where you understand that the reason, and this is true, look, I'll be honest with you, this is true in my own marriage too. I'm only recently married, like 3-4 months, September, and it's true in my own marriage, and I knew it was going to be. I knew it had to be when I got married. That the things I love about my husband, I happen to be married to someone who was born male. I see in my husband many of my own traits, many of my own facets, the things that I will never admit to liking about myself, but actually do. But I also see what I consider the innumerable flaws as well. And that, it works both ways. A lot of what I like about him is what I like about myself. A lot of what I dislike about him is what I dislike about myself. But that's 50-50 with the law of opposites attract. Many of the things I like about my husband are things that, if they were part of my own personality, I wouldn't be able to stand myself. Like, I couldn't. My husband is a naturally optimistic, upbeat kind of a person. I'm not. I am a skeptic. I am a cynic. I am a pessimist in almost every way, shape, and form. And he's not. He's the opposite. But I like that. I like knowing that it's possible to be around someone who is as down as I can be and still be that upbeat. I like the fact that we're physically different, and mostly by that I mean if you've ever met my husband, he's a very thin guy. He's a very active New Yorker. He walks a lot. He does a lot of things every day at work that help him stay very trim. And I'm just naturally big. But that never bothers him. I bitch and moan and whine about how fat I feel I am, and all he tells me is, you could never have you could never have a point where you don't look gorgeous to me. So I think that's the kind of behavior you should look for in a solid relationship. But my time is just about up, so just wanted to get that out there. Joseph Campbell, The Power of Myth. Enjoy.